what's up? Jared here with Bluescreen. So many fields have been forced to move to online-based operations in the past few months because of the pandemic. And many churches aren't an exception to that. My local church was actually moving to online-only services a few months ago because of the pandemic. And I came alongside of them when this started to help them figure out a way to do a high-quality online worship service. And so we've been doing it for a few months now, so I figured I'd make a few videos about how we've been doing these services at my church, because maybe some other churches might be able to benefit from this and learn from it. Today, I'm specifically going to be going over the shooting setups for the worship portion of our weekend services. Now, I'm also going to be doing videos on how we shoot and edit our message portion and a weekend service, as well as the overview of what a typical weekend service looks like from an editing perspective. But those are going to be separate videos and not necessarily related to this one. This one's just going to cover the setups we used when we're shooting worship. Before we can get into the specifics of how we're setting up lighting, it's important to have the context of how we're doing services, or else this isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. So our services are what we consider to be fully produced, meaning that no part of our services is run through a broadcast system. So everything is recorded on separate cameras and then edited in post-production. So there's a full post-production workflow. Now there is, when we're recording audio, a live stereo mix that we're doing there, but we also are recording a full multi-track of that audio so that in the event that we're not happy with the stereo mix, we can edit that after the fact as well. Now, I'm not going to cover audio here because I'm not an audio expert. Our audio engineer handles that for us at our church, but I just wanted to make sure that that was noted. Now, what a lot of churches are doing is they use a single camera and they set it up in the back of the room. And if they have like an iMac camera that they're using on the projector, you know, they might be using that. And this is good because it makes production a lot easier. And most of the work can be done right there live. You know, if they have someone running a switcher, they can do switching, they can have the PowerPoint pop up on the screen, and they can record all that live. And so it makes the editing process basically non-existent, and they're able to just stream the message live. When we were first starting these online services, we had a couple logistical issues with making that happen. And when we tried it, I just wasn't super happy with it on our first attempt at doing it. So we decided to go with the full production method and then maybe revisiting the broadcast system later, which we're just now getting to after been doing this for, you know, like 5 months. So we're just getting to the point where we can do that method. But we're doing this full production system now for a while, and it's allowed us a lot of flexibility that way, and also it has given us a lot better quality than we would have had we gone the production broadcast route. Now, generally, we record our worship and messages in bulk, but at separate times. So we may record 2 or 3 weeks of our worship music in a single day, and then on a different day or later on the same day, record 2 or 3 weeks of our pastors delivering their messages. And when I do this, I usually keep the same setup for a full day, and then I'll change it the next time we record on a different day. So that way, to the congregation, the set is changing every 2 to 3 weeks. Now, before we get into the lighting setup, it is important to understand the layout of the stage at our main campus. So this right here, what you're seeing is a top-down view of our stage. So down here at the bottom, this is the audience side of our stage. And then up here is the top is the back wall of the stage. And this stage is kind of a weird shape. So on the sides here, these are curtains over here and over here. And over here is our green room, which is why you see these doors there. And then on the sides here, we have these stairs. And then we kind of got these weird hexagon shapes all the way around. On the back, we have a pallet wall. You see these at a lot of churches nowadays. We have 3 campuses, and so having a pallet wall is a great way for our church to kind of bring together all the different stages at all of our campuses to kind of give them all a similar feel, because it is easy when you have multiple campuses to make them feel like separate places even though they're all part of the same church. So by using the pallet wall, that's an easily unifying thing at our churches. But the main thing that you should note about our stage that makes it interesting is this large area down here. Now this area right here is actually a separate part of the stage. It's actually 2 steps down from the rest of the stage. And when our pastors are presenting on a regular weekend, that's where they'll stand. And that's important because that means that when we're setting up lighting, we have to account for that. We can't place things on the steps, and it actually makes it very hard when we're putting things up, because it kind of breaks the stage into multiple sections, and you have to keep note of that when you're there. Now, this video isn't focused so much on cameras and gear, but instead it's focused on the sets and our lighting setup. So I just want to touch on gear real quick. We use a whole host of different cameras and lenses for these shoots. So on screen right now, I'm just going to show you a list of the different cameras that we've used for these shoots, and also a different list of the lenses that we've used for these shoots. And you can see it's kind of all over the map. We've used a whole bunch of different stuff. What I can tell you is there are 2 cameras that have been there for every single shoot regardless. And the first one of those is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. And the second one is the Sony a6300. And I would say that neither of these I would consider to be super expensive cameras. All right, with all that said, we can start to get into the sets. All right, so this first setup here is actually the first setup that we had in total when we started shooting. Now, this setup was kind of inspired from the fact that I knew I wanted to go with something dramatic, because this was the first time we were doing these online services, and let's be honest, online services are really different from what people are used to when they go to church. And so because I knew it would be different, I kind of pushed us to lean into the fact that this was different and this was not normal. And because of that, I said, okay, well, how can we create a setup that's just different from what we would normally have on a regular weekend service? And this is what we came up with. It was really dramatic, and I knew that like we couldn't do this on a normal weekend. And so by doing it this way, we could have this super dramatic look. So this is kind of what you're looking at right here. We were running 2 cameras for this shoot. We had 2 camera operators. And so we had 1 camera that was operated by one person, 1 camera operated by another person. Now, the main light source was actually a backlight for this. So what we were using was these Quasar Science LED tubes. So they're right here. We had 1 on one stand and 2 on another stand. And since they're RGB, they give us a lot of latitude to do all sorts of crazy colors and stuff. So we went with real heavy color cast on this. You don't have to use those particular ones, but it was the RGB backlight that was the primary source. And there's plenty of ways you can do that. We just had those lights available at the time, and so that's what we used. But that's not the only light. There was one more light we did use in this setup, and that was because even though we had these bright RGB lights, I didn't want it to just be like a silhouette across RGB. I did want their faces to have a little bit of light on them. So we did use a daylight balanced light on a light stand right here, which you can see. This is the Godox SLB60W. So it's not a super powerful light, but I'm gonna have it linked down in the description. It's a great little light. So that light was on a boom arm, and that boom arm then had the light hanging down with a modifier that kind of made it look like a China ball. And that China ball modifier gives some real even light on both of their faces to kind of fill in some of that, so it wasn't just a total silhouette. All right, so our next set is actually the set that we used for Good Friday and Easter. Now, it wasn't the exact same on Good Friday and Easter. There were some changes, and I'll get into how that worked. But this set, we knew we wanted to do something kind of actually the opposite of what we did in the last set, because we knew Good Friday and Easter, we wanted to be a little bit different, and we wanted to kind of tell a story with them. And so what makes this set unique versus all the other sets that we have is actually the message portion of the set and the worship portion of the set took place on the same stage. One of the problems we had with the first set was that we did message in a completely different space, and it kind of was a little bit jarring at first for people to get used to. And so we actually decided to try and integrate them. And the reason we wanted to do that is because even though we weren't recording the worship and the message at the same time, we wanted to make it feel like they were both happening live in the same space. So when we edited it together and we cut it together, we actually did like a pan between them. It made it look like they were actually taking place live in the same space, and we were recording all this in one go, even though it was still a fully produced and edited work. As far as look for the set went, this was around the time that Elevation Music had just released their music video for their song Grays into Gardens. And I really loved like the high key look of the music video, and it had this kind of white look, super high key, but it also had like these green undertones. And I was just really in love with that look, and I wanted to try and achieve something similar with our setup. Obviously, we don't have the kind of production value that they have, but I wanted to see what I was able to do to kind of get that look. And so this is what I came up with. I'm gonna go over the message portion of the stage first, because it's going to be a little bit easier to go over. So the main part of the message portion of the stage is actually this giant backdrop. So this white backdrop is actually just a giant piece of paper. It's from Savage Paper, and we use that backdrop for the pastors to actually stand on when they were presenting. And I wanted to do a super high key look, so one of the things I wanted to do was make sure that the backdrop was really just kind of washed out and super white. So we have these two right here. These were just some real basic soft boxes that you can get on Amazon for like 30 bucks. And they took some fluorescent bulbs, and we had those sitting on there just to wash out the backdrop. That was their only purpose. And we were okay with those lights particularly kind of sitting on stage and being in view the whole time. It was part of the look, kind of that high key onset offset look that we were really looking for. And so those you could actually see in a lot of the shots. And that's okay. I really like the way that turned out, because they're not super bright, they don't stand out too much, and so I like the way it looked. And so the next part of the stage is right here, and this is the Godox SLB60W again, and this one was using a softbox. It's kind of I think like a 30-inch glow softbox by Adorama. And that way it just gives the primary key light on our pastors when they're teaching. And that's just on a light stand pointing right at the pastors. And then on the other side, we have a newer 660W, I think. It's a bicolor LED light, and that would act as a kicker for the pastors when they are teaching. So next up, we're gonna move to the worship portion of our set. So the difference between this set and the last one is that we have 3 musicians instead of 2, which makes shooting a little more difficult. And so what we wanted to do when we were setting this up, since we were trying to do the message and the worship both on the same stage at the same time, we kind of divided it up into 2 separate sections. So you can see kind of right here, there's this invisible line drawn that separates the 2 sets. And so we have our 3 musicians kind of sitting over here in this little circle area, and that's kind of how the whole set is arranged, is in this little circle. So what we did was we arranged them kind of in a semicircle, and then we shot with 4 cameras. We had 3 cameras were stationary, and they were on tripods because we didn't have 2 camera people for this one. I was the only operator running cameras for this Easter and Good Friday videos. So we had 3 on tripods, and then 1 camera was being operated by me. So you can see we had this one kind of shooting there, that one kind of shooting there, that one kind of shooting there, and they would move from time to time. You know, I would, in between takes, I would move them or something like that, but that's kind of how the setup looked. And then this one was being operated by me. Now the main light source for them here was, again, the Godox SLB60W. We had 2 of these, so we had one over here and one over here. And this one in the worship section had the China ball light modifier that we had on in the previous set, and that modifier allows us to evenly distribute that light across all 3 of our musicians' faces that way. And instead of having a directional light that's gonna get 1 person or 2 people, by using the globe modifier, we're able to get all 3 of them in one go. I said before I wanted to get the super high key look. And to get that, one of the things I had to do was try to incorporate as much white into our set as possible, right? And so one part of that was using the big white backdrop, because even in the worship portion of our set, you can still see the white backdrop in some of the angles. And that white backdrop is so big that it just kind of fills the space and looks like a big white wall. And so it gives that illusion of being a super high key part of the set. But to do that on the other angles, what I actually did was pull out of these, and these are white cards that you can get at like Lowe's or Home Depot, and they're basically corrugated plastic, like you'd find cardboard, like a big sheet of cardboard, except just made out of plastic, right? And so they're just big white sheets, and I simply hooked those up to some light stands, and then I set up lights in between them to give some backlight. Now these lights are all just cheap lights. They're all like Yongnuo, just 160 LED lights, but they just give a lot of strong backlight. So there's a lot of glare, and it makes it kind of this low contrast look, like the Elevation music video. All right, so this next set, I really, really loved the way that it turned out. So this one, we went from 3 musicians to 4 musicians. So we went from 2 musicians to 3 musicians to 4 musicians in this set. And so because we had 4 musicians, I knew that lighting them was gonna be even harder, and so I wanted to go even a little more extreme with how we were gonna do it. So what we decided to do was actually switch the direction we were shooting. You know, a lot of the time we've been shooting kind of in this direction, right? So towards the back wall. And so what we decided to do this time was actually switch the direction and shoot this way. By doing that way, we're able to get a lot more depth because we can go the whole width of the stage instead of the depth of the stage. Because like I said, getting the depth of the stage is a lot harder since we have this in the way. So what we did with this one is we went with the depth of the stage, and we kind of positioned them almost right in the middle of the stage. So we kind of put them in a kind of a curved line, just kind of like how you see here. Now their primary light was both of the Godox SLB60Ws with soft boxes on them. And that way we had one Godox going that way and one going that way, kind of gave them some even light from both sides. And because of the law of fall off, and I don't know the technical term for it, but that would mean that the people who are far away would actually get less of the light from one light and then more of the light from the other light. And so they're actually going to have uneven light on their face, which is going to give it a little shape, and it won't be totally flat that way. And it worked really well. I really like the way that lighting turned out. Now the other thing that we did here was I knew that I wanted to make the background more interesting since we were shooting long ways and we had that depth to work with. I wanted to try and get some bokeh out of the background. And so what I did is I set up light stands here, 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 and here, and we strung up Christmas lights that I got out of the attic. And these Christmas lights I strung up at different heights and stuff like that, so that when they went from light stand to light stand, there's just a lot of differences in the distance away from the camera and the height of the lights, so it kind of looked more random than it actually was. Because we had these lights in the background, we wanted to make it feel like those lights were actually providing this real warm glow on our subjects. And the honestly part is that Christmas lights can't do that. So what we decided to do was bring in the Quasar Science LED tubes again, and we set up 3 of those, and we set them to orange. And essentially the only purpose we had them for was to provide that warmth, and they were providing the backlight, and it made it feel like psychologically that the Christmas lights were the one providing that warmth and that glow, but it wasn't the Christmas lights at all. It was actually the Quasar bulbs. And I think that worked really well. It provided the exact look I was going for, and I was super happy with the result. All right, and the last setup we're going to cover today is actually the simplest one of all the setups that we've done today. And this one actually only has 1 light, and I'm really happy about this one. This one actually is my favorite one that we've done so far, and it's the simplest of all of them, and I'm super happy with it. So what they did with this one is there's 3 musicians here this time, and they said to me before we put the setup, they said we're going to be doing a stripped down acoustic worship. So we're gonna have 1 instrument and that's it. It's 1 acoustic guitar, and then we're gonna have some vocalists, and that's it. It's gonna be super low key and super stripped down and kind of simplified. And so I wanted my light setup to reflect that, right? Because if they're gonna do a simplified setup, I'll do a simplified setup as well. So we did 3 cameras this time, and I was operating 1 of them. And so I believe it was these 2 that were not operated by me, and then this one was, right? And so I positioned them in a really close semicircle, definitely not obeying social distancing rules, but because the camera kind of exaggerates things and makes them look farther apart, they definitely had to be pretty close in this one. And then what I did is I just set up a light stand with a really long boom arm. And then right here in the middle, I had to kind of draw it wrong on the diagram, but right in the middle of them, I had the Godox SLB60W with a deep softbox pointing straight down, right? And the reason I did that is because if you had any other lighting modifier, you'd spill all this light over here on the back wall. And when you're shooting this way, you're gonna see all of that. And I wanted the ball to be as dark as I could get it. And I could only get that using a deep softbox. And when I say deep softbox, I mean the softboxes like the Aputure Light Dome, or Neewer has a deep softbox that we used. They're just a really deep softbox, and they really direct that light straight down and let us, instead of letting it kind of fall all over the place. And so guys, that does it for the light setups that I'm talking about today. There are more, but I'm not gonna go through all of them because I don't feel like all of them are super great. I've been doing a lot of experimenting and not everyone has turned out as good as these ones have. But I hope you guys learned something from this video, and I hope maybe if you're doing worship at your church or you're recording some videos for your church, that this could have helped you in some kind of way. And if it did, please let me know by leaving a comment down below. If you guys got suggestions about what I can do better, because again, I'm not perfect and I'm still learning just like you guys. So if you have thoughts that you can provide me to make this better, let me know down below. I'd love to hear them. If you guys like this video, please like, subscribe for more stuff like this. I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. 80-some degrees in here, I'm done.